Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 19, with Art Regner and, of course, Hockey Hall of Fame writer from USA Today, Kevin Allen. As you can see, the sun is directly shining behind me, so I'm a little more washed out than usual. I promise you, I am not Edgar or Johnny Winter. I am not an albino. But I may look like one today. And also, I have a severe upper respiratory condition, so... and I had to take some cough medicine with codeine, so if I pass out during the middle of this, you'll know why. But speaking of passing out, it looks like at about, the 5-minute mark of last night's game, something happened. Luke Glendening goes out. The Red Wings end up losing the hockey game last night in overtime, 3-2 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. The series is now tied at 2 games apiece. The crucial game now, number 5, will be Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. Between the Red Wings and Tampa Bay. So let's bring Kevin in. And Kevin, a very odd game because I have been giving you the business, shall we say, about Luke Glendening. I mean, I'm not going to say that you're leading his fan club, but you certainly should be in the room when he negotiates his next contract with the Red Wings. With that said, I am amazed that one player getting hurt opened up the door for Tyler Johnson in Tampa Bay. It's pretty incredible, but really that's kind of looks like that's what happened. Am I oversimplifying it, or was Glendening's loss, or am I being Captain Obvious, was huge for the Red Wings?
Well, it was huge, and rather than have me extolling the virtues of Luke Glendening, I think his agent should actually just get a copy of the two the press conferences that were held by John Cooper and by Mike Babcock after the game, when both were asked directly whether the Glendening injury had a result on turning the game, and they both agreed that it had. I mean, to that point, Johnson had not been effective in the 2 games in Joe Louis Arena, and Glendening had been checking him, had been the number one. Or been the center that assigned to watch him, and what everyone who saw the game knows what happened. It was Glendening goes in to check Tyler Johnson, makes a hit that the Lightning took offense to. Hedman comes in, engages 2 roughing penalties, but when the smoke clears, instead of going to the penalty box, Glendening goes to the dressing room to get stitched up, and while he's gone in those 7 minutes, it changed this series because Tyler Johnson goes on an offensive rampage, 2 goals and assisting on a 3rd goal in a 7-minute span, and it's a 3-2 overtime loss. And to me, the underpublicized story on this is it's not like that somebody who isn't capable of dealing with Johnson was assigned to him after Glendening left. It was Pavel Datsyuk who was on the ice for all 3 of those. We all know that Datsyuk is one of the best defensive forwards in the game, so I think it just kind of shows that Johnson was pretty possessed at that point to be a difference maker. And I don't think it is overstating it if the Lightning win this series to say that it turned on the Hedman encounter with Glendening, because obviously the whole thing changed. And to be honest, as I was watching that game, though, I really felt if the Lightning got a goal, they were going to get 3. And I asked Anton Strawman about that after the game, and he said that's exactly what they were talking about, that they just felt they needed to get a leak in the dam, and then they would, because I mean they're NHL's top offensive team. It's difficult to keep them down. So and Mrazek had done a good job, and I don't fault him for what happened. I mean, those were clearly defensive breakdowns on all of those goals.
Well, I pardon me. I'm glad that you said that, because everybody, I know that. First of all, I thought that the hit that Glendening served to Johnson was far enough away from the boards. I mean, he was able to brace himself and he got hit. So I really didn't think that was a penalty or a dirty hit. I thought he was just trying to finish his check, which he had been doing all day, or all game, or the last 2 games, shall I say. But I thought Killorn came and grabbed him and was going to put him down, this is what I actually tweeted because people were saying Killorn or whatever, and I thought it was when Hedman came in and kind of draped him and pretty much just pile drived him to the ice. I thought that's where Glendening probably hurt himself. It was 2 against 1. I really thought it was really, really cheap of the Lightning to do that. I mean, at that time, Glendening was engaged by one player who had him from behind and was taking him down, and then Hedman, all 6'7" of him, just kind of comes in and is, pounding on him. And, and I'm looking at that. And Mike Babcock said something about that too. Okay, if you're going to penalize Glendening for the hit on Johnson, certainly Killorn and also Hedman have to get a penalty. There has to be a power play to Detroit on that, but the officiating in the NFL is so inconsistent. I just didn't really understand that play, but I'm glad that you mentioned Hedman because everybody that kept talking to me or responding to me, and I get so many responses after these games, they said, "What are you talking about, Hedman?" But I really thought that Hedman going in there and grabbing Glendening on top is, I think, what injured him. I don't know if that's a fact, but it just seemed to me that he was kind of holding his own against Killorn, who's not a real big guy to begin with, but I don't know. So I don't even know if I have a question here, Kevin. I'm just kind of stating something, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, I really thought that Hedman engaging with Glendening is what took him out of the game.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I mean, Glendening didn't say after the game, how he had been injured. As you know, they're loath to discuss their injuries, but he was bandaged up, and the good news is that he expects to play next game. But as Babcock said, you never know until you get there. Sometimes they swell up, and we've seen infections, as happened to Brendan Smith earlier in the season. There are always kind of issues, so you never want. And plus, it's not as important, obviously, in Tampa, where Mike Babcock will not have the last change, so he won't really get the matchups that he wants. I mean, occasionally you can by changing on the fly and changing quickly. You can do that, but I would say what I thought on Glendening's hit was it was a gray area. Like, I agree that it was far enough from the boards where it wasn't an obvious poor hit, but he has back to him, and sometimes when you're far out too, it can be a very dangerous play because if you stumble forward, you're right into the board. So probably what I would call it would be sort of ill-advised. Like, you're taking a chance doing that. That's an area of emphasis, the checking from behind. So at that point, why do it? I guess would be my perspective on that. And with regard to the power play, I mean, I agree with you on that. And Mike Babcock said he was pretty blunt about it, that he felt that he should have had a power play that resulted from that. And I think officials in that type of the game are just reluctant to put a team on the power play. Now, not all of them, but some of them are. Some of them are. I've sort of sensed in the playoffs that there's been a kind of turned back the clock a little bit to the days when the refs would prefer to let the players kind of decide it when the game gets on the line. I mean, scoring during the regular season was up 5-5. The reason why scoring was down overall and why we didn't have a 90-point score this season was the fact that power plays are down. They just weren't calling as many penalties. And do we really believe that players aren't committing as many fouls as they have in the past? I find that hard to believe. So I would say they're calling fewer penalties. But it's a devastating a loss for the Red Wings. And I thought it was interesting. Mike Babcock made a point of saying that he rarely talks to his teams after a game, and I think there are a lot of NHL coaches like that. When guys are emotional and they're mad, angry, that's not the time to try to make points. But he wanted to make a point, and so he said he walked in and he said, "Hey, look, we stole game one. We probably deserved to lose that game, and we won it. They stole this game." So it's 2-2. That's probably what it should be. So it's a 3-game series. Let's go play. And his point, I think he's trying to tell him is that you can't turn that loss into 2 or 3 losses because you're so demoralized by it. You have to approach it, and he's right, because the perspective is if the Red Wings had been down, 2-1 in the series and they had won Game 4, they'd be overjoyed going to Tampa Bay. So the circumstances can have a lasting impact on the team psychologically, and I think he's trying to head that off. And he said they can feel sorry for themselves on the way to Tampa, and then they got to get over it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Peter Mrazek. Now, I thought goals 2 and 3 you couldn't fault him on. And probably the first goal, I know there were defensive breakdowns. I was surprised, but maybe he was anticipating Johnson to cut and go in front of the net, and he beat him on the short side because he had that post hugged. I mean,
Yeah.
he veered off it and gave him, and let's face it, Johnson's a bit of a marksman, as we know, and he beat him. And maybe I'm being real nitpicky here, but I thought that first goal on Mrazek's part, I was surprised, if anything, because he's so aggressive, instead of him moving off the post and going towards the middle where he anticipated Johnson going, I thought he would come out of his net and try to take the angle away, which he seems to do all the time, and if he was going to leave that post, be more aggressive and make sure that, that the angle was cut off to either side and give him no net to shoot at. I thought and not that I'm, Ken Dryden Jr. here or anything, but I thought that was a bad goal on his part.
Yeah, well, I think you have a future as a goaltending coach. That was an excellent analysis of that of play, because he did give up his post. He surrendered his post. He moved off, and it is his style to move forward to reduce the angle, as you said, and he really didn't do it on that play. And it seemed to me that he was guessing, and he guessed wrong. And it reminds me of the stories of Dominik Hasek. Like everybody who followed Dominik Hasek, who was one of my all-time favorite players watching, knows that he had this tendency every once in a while to just give up ridiculously bad goals. And the reason he would be that he would anticipate what the logical move was for the shooter. And sometimes the shooters weren't smart enough to do the logical move, so he'd be moving over, and then suddenly the guy unexpectedly would fire a shot, not because he was being tricky or sneaky, but he just didn't know what the logical play was, and he would catch Hasek, the thinking man's goalie, napping. And I agree with you. I thought that Mrazek thought that Johnson, who is likes to dart in front of the net and is a shifty, smaller center, was going to cut across the net. And I think he was going over to try to head that off, and then suddenly the shot came. And Johnson's a crafty player. There's no doubt about that, and he's proven that this season. And he's been more dangerous in this series, and some would say more dangerous in the regular season than Steven Stamkos,
right?
Who's among the league's most consistent scorers and doesn't have a goal in the series. So, but all goalies are going to give up goals. Like they're not going to go a whole season not making a mistake, and no player does. On every I don't the greatest players in the world still make a lot of mistakes. So I'm not going to he should have stopped that one, but I think overall you got to say his goaltending was pretty strong in that game.
Well, I mean, what's it say about the Red Wings then if Peter Mrazek has to be shut out Tampa Bay every game? I mean, be perfect, and you're right. So I'm not trying to fault him. I guess my biggest thing is I know he was anticipating, and I understand that. What I didn't understand is usually, as you said, he goes forward, not sideways. And this time he decided to go sideways, but he was guessing. Now, let's go to Ben Bishop, and Kevin, this is my take on Ben Bishop at this point in this series. I know it's tied up 2-2. He didn't have a good game 1. Game 2 he played pretty good. He wasn't all, I guess he's been adequate the last 2 games. However, by taking 2 penalties yesterday, if the Red Wings can get any sustained pressure, and I do not believe they've gotten any sustained pressure on maybe the 5-on-3 throughout these first 4 games. I mean, they've gotten some goals on him, but really sustained pressure where they're peppering him, because he seems like he's a meltdown waiting to happen in my book. He does not seem very stable out there. And, if for the life of me, and give Tampa Bay a whole lot of credit, especially their defense and their relentless, forechecking. And, they're relentless. They are relentless. Yzerman has put together a very good hockey club. I think we can all say that. And I am going to say this since this is episode 19 of the Red and White Authority. But with all that said, I think they can get to Bishop. I really do. I'm not saying he's made some big saves, but his overall performance, I think if the Red Wings can just, as I said, pepper him a little bit, sustain some pressure, they can score some goals on this guy.
Agreed. He's been average. He has not looked invincible. The Red Wings know invincible goalies when they see them. They've faced their share of guys that are, hot at the right time when their teams needed them to be hot, and Bishop's not that guy. He does look leaky, and he looks, he's not Carey Price. He's not playing like Braden Holtby is in Washington right now. So I think they feel pretty good about their ability. Now, saying all that, I felt, and John Cooper made a point of this, and I thought it was a real valid point. When it was 2-0, if they give up another goal, it could have been lights out. And Holtby held his own. He dug in a little bit after he gave up the one where he batted in the net on the shot by Anderson. And then he dug in a little bit. And I think that was kind of crucial for this team because, giving up a bad goal like that, it can't be followed by another goal or your team isn't going to dig out of that hole.
No, and all right, I'll give Bishop that much. I think he did kind of settle down, but again, and I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to see it in the remainder 2 or 3 games, depending on how far this series goes. If they haven't been able to do it for the first 4 games, and Pavel Datsyuk played his worst game, I think, in a long time in the last several seasons. It seemed the puck was bouncing. He just didn't seem to have the energy. They were speculating on TV if he was hurt. So I don't know if they're going to do it. I think they're going to just have to in their transition game or quick. They're going to have to score their goals or something because for whatever reason, Tampa has figured out how to certainly bottle up Detroit or allow Detroit to be what I like to call one and done. And I'm not sure after 4 games if you can figure out how to counteract what Tampa's doing at this point because they're a very good coaching staff, the Red Wings are. The Red Wings are a very smart hockey team. I think if you talk to anybody, Detroit's overall hockey IQ on their 24-man roster or whatever is probably tops in the league, but for whatever reason, they're just not able to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it's they need everybody playing at their highest levels, and they didn't get that. Even last game, because Datsyuk wasn't very visible out there offensively, and then at the end he just didn't even have his defensive excellence, as well. It was interesting. I was watching Brendan Smith, and I swear at one point when he was begging for not to get a penalty that he clearly deserved, it almost looked like he was saying, you got to help me, or I'm never going to get on this ice ever again.
Come on, dude, just one.
Yeah, you know what I'm going through here. If you put me in the box one more time, I am never going to get back on the ice.
You might as well write out my bus ticket to Grand Rapids.
yeah, that's pretty much it. So, because that's sure what it looked like when you saw John with the, and apparently. In his own mind, Brendan Smith has never ever committed a penalty in his career because he's sure always surprised that he's headed to the box. Last night was no different. But there were a lot of good things last night. Like they really played a very effective, strong game, except for the final 7 minutes, and in my opinion, probably would have continued to play like that had they felt confident in what they were doing, and I think they liked the strategy. It was working well. Datsyuk was on Stamkos. Glendening was on the Johnson line, and everything. Life was good. And then suddenly Glendening was gone. And boy, what a remarkable rise he's had. Right. From being a guy that was unsigned to now being, crucial to the point where we're now saying that his absence for 7 minutes changed the course of this playoff series.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is pretty amazing. One of the players, actually, a couple of players that have been taking some heat, Jonathan Erickson, who, as each game progresses, looks more and more like a pylon and a turnover machine. And I hate to, I shouldn't probably be that bold, about it. I mean, he's out there trying, but I think for the last couple of seasons, Jonathan Erickson's game has really fallen off. And you know that, Kevin. I mean, I've been that way. I'm not quite sure what the Red Wings see in this guy, except he's big. And, and I think Nicholas Cromwell has just played a lot of hockey at this point and is starting to show the effects of a long season and maybe the mental strain of a team that seems to be up and down. But defensively, and I know we've talked about this, and we're going to have plenty of red and white authority shows during the offseason as well, because there's going to be all kinds of moves made. But it is pretty clear that Detroit's number one priority has to be shoring up their defense, somehow shoring up their defense next year, because it is very much turnover prone, and once a team starts cycling in Detroit's zone, I don't know what goes on, but these guys just can't seem to get the puck and clear it. I mean, they get it on their stick, and I think this is what Mike Babcock has alluded to a lot too. I don't know how we can't clear our own end when we have the puck in our own end, yet we still can't get it out of our own end. I mean, and I know that, Ken Holland always tells me, calm yourself down, because if you go into all these other 29 NHL cities, all they're doing is breaking down their team and saying how bad they are. Everybody notices the flaws. But when you see these flaws over and over and over again, there has to be some legitimacy to them. And I am, for the life of me, can't figure out how these guys cannot either turn the puck over in their own end by trying that pass up the middle, which not very many of them can do. How they can't, when they get the puck on their stick, just chip it out or get a delay of game, which seems to be, something that they do quite often. I mean, I'm just frustrated to a point of, why can't the defense get it right this late in the season with so much at stake?
Yeah, well, and it's the key for them is I keep saying it. When you become the goalie coach, I'll become the assistant coach, and I'll be speaking about the simplified defensive system that I want to play, where keep it simple and get the puck out. But we didn't even talk about the Kaiser's pinch, obviously, which which was a bad play at the wrong time. That's just not advisable in that situation to do that, and then you're off to the races. And on that winning goal, it looked like it was going to be 4-on-1 there for a while. Like it
did not look good as it was developing. Even on television, you're thinking this game's about to be over.
Yeah, no, I mean, you could certainly see that coming for a long way, and I'm sure Mrazek saw it coming too. So, well. I tend to agree with you that there's going to be some major changing of the defense. I wonder, though, how much of it is going to come from Grand Rapids. Marchenko, is he going to become a fixture? Who's a pretty safe, dependable guy, it looks like. Will Sproul finally get an opportunity? He's regularly listed among the better prospects. Like when you see those prospect lists that Hockey News puts one out, and I've seen other ones as well, where they start listing the 50 guys who are not in the NHL who are going to have an impact. So but they're going to have to get a free agent. And is Mike Green going to be the answer? Is it going to be we haven't mentioned him now in 2 or 3 shows, so something's wrong. Dion Phaneuf, we can start that, beat that drum to death for a while if we want. So, and and the thing about Phaneuf that's so intriguing, I think, is that I think there's still sort of a longing for the days when the Red Wings were such a physical team. We all know how much the Red Wing fans love the tough hockey. Like they celebrate the puck possession finesse style that the Red Wings have played for a quarter of a century. But some of the more popular teams were those rough and ready teams with Probert and Kosher, and even during the finesse years, the grinders, the grind line with nobody hit like McCarty and Maltby and Draper. They had a fan base that was strong as probably everybody but Stevie. I think Detroit fans would love to have a couple of big bodied banging defensemen to kind of join this team and make it a little bit different than it is now.
Well, I agree with you, and I actually think that Dion Phaneuf, I'm pretty sure he was beloved in Calgary because in Calgary, the Canadian press made him the second coming of Bobby Orr or something. I remember there was a lot of high expectations. If you're a Canadian defenseman and you have, I think right now, I'll tell you who I think is the best defenseman in the league. I think it's Drew Doughty. I really do.
Yeah.
I love Drew Doughty.
Yeah, it's not even close in my opinion.
I think that, and I like him. I like his personality, and maybe because he plays in Los Angeles, I think the Canadian press loves him, but they don't love him quite as much as I think that they should, because they don't really pump him up as much as I believe that they usually do whenever there's a Canadian player that's good. Now, I'm not going to get down on the Canadian press. I love my Americans, and I love my Russians and my Swedes because I'm here in Detroit. But and I love Canadians too because Canada, as I told you, I thought Ontario was the 51st state until I thought Windsor was part of America. When I was a kid. But with all that said, I guess my point being is that Dion Phaneuf coming to Detroit, I think would certainly be a rebirth and a renaissance for him, because I think people, obviously, Detroit fans are very knowledgeable, and I think they would like him. I think he would have less pressure on him than he had in playing in two Canadian cities, even though Detroit there would be pressure on him and people would expect him to be a physical force. But I think he would embrace his role here, and from what keeps being written in Canada is that he was super upset that the Leafs somehow didn't figure out how to make him a Detroit Red Wing. So it appears that this could be a marriage that could work out very, very well for Detroit. Yet, I guess it all depends. Babcock to Toronto still isn't going away. And does Babcock, if he does become part of it, does he want to trade Phaneuf to Detroit? I'm not so sure he would want to do that. And I know Brendan will have a lot to say, but I guess if they could somehow get it done, and I don't know if they want to trade between divisions or if you have to get a third team in here where, they trade Phaneuf to a Western Conference team, a Western Conference team trades him to Detroit, something that way. I don't know. But at this point, even Mike Green, I like Mike Green. I think he's an offensive force. I'm not so sure that's what the Red Wings need. I think they need somebody like Dion Phaneuf who can play a physical game. I'm not sure, though. I don't know, Kevin. Maybe I'm rambling again.
Well, they probably need both, actually. But, the one thing about puck possession defensemen that sometimes is overlooked by fans is that, it's the old Wayne Gretzky. If I have the puck, the other team can't score, that's good defense. And so if you bring in a guy like Green who can control the puck, Chris Letang is not exactly Mr. Defense in Pittsburgh, but, boy, he can control the puck. And they have it so much that it prevents the other team from scoring, and that makes him effective. So I think that's why there's still a fascination with Green. But with regard to Phaneuf, it seemed to me like you were angling a Shanahan to Nil to Holland type arrangement. Right. Just keep working the old Red Wing network, and maybe get Yzerman involved as well, and right. And see if we can get him to do it. But it would be a I think the guy that I think most understood the wonder and the enjoyment of playing in Detroit was Todd Bertuzzi, who has sort of been a lightning rod for stirring up trouble with the media because of his background, and suddenly got to Detroit and realized he had the benefit of playing in a real hockey town where the hockey team is important and relevant. And it's exciting, and the building is filled all the time. But you don't have the type of media that really puts you under a microscope 24/7. Like the media in Detroit is, they're critical when they need to be, but it's not relentless like it is in Philadelphia or New York or Toronto or Montreal. It's there's a bit of civility to the media in Detroit. And I'm not saying that as criticism. I'm just saying that, it's just a little nicer for players to play here. And I think a lot of players have sort of gotten that word. So maybe Phaneuf understood that as well. And, A, it's a good team here. B, they've got great ownership that takes care of their players. But C, it's a good place to play. It's a player-friendly environment.
Yeah, it certainly is a player-friendly environment, and I think that and I think once, and you're right, Todd Bertuzzi is a great example. Once they get here, they kind of understand the culture of this city, as opposed to other cities across the United States where, hey, you're a bum no matter what you do. In Detroit, they just want you to do well. They really do. They, not so much that, I don't know if it's an individual thing. We want you to do well, but we want you to do well because it makes us feel good. And I mean, which is maybe, I don't know. I would imagine that should be a sports fan's mindset. With that said, because I really got off the subject a little bit there. Let's move back to the Red Wings, Kevin. We've both been around a long time. Playoffs, there's no such thing as momentum. Each game is different. And people were I was talking to a few people today saying, well, what do you think is going to happen? I said, I think the key right now as we look at Game 5 is that, the Red Wings were trying to say the right things yesterday, and Babcock talking to them, and the leadership in the room. And this is a team that's made the playoff 24 consecutive seasons. So I do think that there's a balance in their room, and maybe as devastated as they are, they'll be able to bounce back and pretty much have I think a fairly optimistic mindset going into Game 5. I'm not saying that it's going to help them win the game. I think the big question mark is how is an inexperienced young Tampa Bay team that was on, walking, as I like to say, that green mile, the last 13 steps there, and boom, the governor suddenly calls, and guess what? Not only are we're free, we're out of jail, I mean, so they go out that way. Do they think the series is over? I mean, are they feeling so good about themselves? I almost said, and maybe this is wishful thinking on my part, if Detroit was going to lose a hockey game at home, maybe this was the best way for them to lose it, because it appears that they're steamrolled, that everything's got to be out of Detroit, everything's out of the tank, that Zook didn't look good, defensive breakdowns, and that Tampa's looking at it and saying, listen, we're so much better than these guys. We're going to win. We're just going to win. Where the Red Wings are saying, yeah, well, we've been down this road before, and it's a little bit harder than you guys think. I mean, am I wishful thinking this, or is there some validity to it? Because I think, and I guess what I'm trying to say shortly, in a short statement, I believe the Red Wings will be okay going into that game. I think the big question is where's Tampa going to be? What's their mindset and how they're going to approach it, considering they have to feel pretty good about themselves.
Well, I think they do feel good about themselves, and I have to be honest. To me, this feels like Tampa Bay is going to win 4-1 on Saturday. That they feel good about themselves. Stamkos is overdue. Johnson is hot. They have the last change. To me, the only way that doesn't happen is if Mrazek comes in and again just plays so strong that he gives his team some confidence and they can eke out a 2-1 or a 3-2 win, where they get maybe a bad goal from Bishop. I don't know that I completely. I mean, it is true that every game has its own identity, but there is some psychological carryover and some confidence, and we've seen it with so many teams. And the Kings are always a great example of that when they've won, because they get in that come to the rank to win.
All right,
and
okay.
That's what happened.
All right, Kevin. You were breaking up a lot there, so hopefully the audience heard. I didn't hear too much about that. I understand what you're saying. I definitely get it, and I guess I wouldn't be surprised if it's 4-1. But I'm going to find it. I would not be surprised if Steve Yzerman doesn't talk to his team at this point. because this guy's been through it all. I mean, what happened Thursday night at Joe Louis Arena, as glorious and as great as I think Steve Yzerman felt, he probably sat there and had a little bit of empathy for what Red Wings and Red Wing fans are going for, because he's been on the end of that a lot. We've seen this before. This isn't something new. The Red Wings have, at times, and I guess when you're in the playoffs for 24 consecutive seasons, you're going to have great memories and bad memories. And so, and I guess that goes back to my point where I think the team, even though there's some young guys there, I think they'll be calmed down enough with the experience and the leadership that they have. I'm looking forward to this game, and obviously one of the key factors if Detroit's going to pull this off, and it's a Herculean task. I'm not going to say it's not. Is going to certainly be the play of Peter Mrazek. When we look at this at this game coming up, though, Kevin, I'm under the impression that there's a couple of things going on here. One, something's up with Pavel Datsyuk, as we've sort of addressed. I don't know if it's more of a mental fatigue or, Datsyuk has these games where, I'm not going to say float, because I think he tries, where it's just not happening for him for whatever reason. Whatever move he's trying, the puck's bouncing over his stick, or, he's not, interceptions, they're intercepting his pass, they're anticipating his moves or something. He usually bounces back from that. And then on the other hand, is the mystery of Steven Stamkos. He seems long overdue, but I was watching him last night, and it appears to me that he's not getting himself in the right position to shoot, and then they're trying to force the puck to him in some instances where I think he knows they're trying to force the puck to him, which I think takes him out of his game. He doesn't look like he has much flow. In a strange sense, it reminds me almost of Gustav Nyquist, and I'm not comparing the two, where they're skating. They seem to be moving, but they seem to be going nowhere, meaning that they're not making any plays. Am I being overcritical, or am I, just full of pooey here? I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, Stamkos hasn't scored in 10 of his last 12 games, and prior to the end of March, he had never gone even 4 games without scoring a goal. So he's in a bit of a slump that's dates to a month. So you might be on to something. To me, he's most dangerous when he's in that high slot area and he's ripping that wrist shot of his. It reminds me actually of Joe Sakic, the way he would just get in that high slot and just snap that shot and somehow it'd find the upper corner. So I think to me he feels overdue, but he doesn't look like the same Steven Stamkos. So he could have an injury as well. There's so many of the top players in the league that are playing hurt right now that it wouldn't shock me if he's one of them.
Yeah, I mean, and I definitely think. Datsyuk was slew-footed last night, and which was a penalty. But it seems, and maybe it's me, but it seemed that Tampa Bay wanted to get physical with Detroit. But I also think that they wanted to take some liberties, maybe knowing in the playoffs you can get away with more things, because I'm not saying that Detroit's a team that's, absolves of cheap shots, but it really seemed like the intensity and the edge plays were really made by Tampa, and I thought that they were a little bit borderline dirty, yet a lot of things, they were trying to throw Detroit off their game any way possible, and for the most part, though, I think you got to hand it to them because I think it worked. Yeah.
No, they've really been an aggressive team, the Lightning have, and that's not their game. But they've got some big boys. Hedman is a big tall guy, and they've got some size, and they have a willingness to sort of to mix it up a little bit. And I think one of the differences of this Lightning team compared to last season is just their compete level is a little higher, and I think that comes from adding Anton Strawman and Boyle, who have played a lot of hockey in the postseason with the New York Rangers, and I hope the Red Wing fans sort of honed in on Strawman, because I think he's an underrated defenseman. When you look at, I know the Red Wings were somewhat interested in him as well, and he could have changed the Detroit defense if they could have landed him last summer, because he's a pretty effective guy at both ends of the ice. A real underrated player. An A-minus defenseman in my book. A guy that can do a lot of different things.
Well, I agree with you. I think that was one guy that they targeted, and again, you have to give it up to Steve Yzerman for recognizing what his team needs and going out and getting it. I think that Strawman. I was under the impression when free agency hit last summer that Detroit had a fairly good shot at Strawman. I knew that he was very, very high on their list and on their board, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. Kevin, going into this game, your gut feeling, and it's not that I don't disagree with you. I guess I just don't want to admit it. I'm trying to, escape here. But with that said, I'm real curious. Do you think even if Tampa wins this game rather decisively tomorrow, which is your general feeling, can the Red Wings win this series, or was last night it? I mean, this is. I know we've already said that if they do lose, that certainly Game 4 was the turning point, the comeback. But are they capable of winning this series?
Well, I think they are. If you look at the last 2 games they've played at Joe Louis Arena, in their mind they won them both. I mean, that was the point Babcock was making in the post-game comments that he made to the players. He's trying to tell them, hey, look, you played good hockey really for 6 periods. And we should have come away with 2 wins at Joe Louis Arena. We deserved 2 wins. We played well enough. We just had some bad 7 minutes and things that we were unlucky with Glendening, having to go in. So certainly they're capable of it. And we've seen Mrazek win a game, carry a team. And John Cooper was talking about Bishop just not losing. He said sometimes you just need your goalie not to lose a game, and he didn't lose that game for him last night. But he hasn't won one for him yet either. So I think the Red Wings have a little bit of advantage in goal. I think Mrazek has proven to be a bigger difference maker than Bishop has in this series, and I think they've shown they're capable of putting together some pretty good hockey. Like you can't believe that Tampa doesn't have some trepidation about playing in Joe Louis Arena again, because they haven't been very good on the road, other than those 7 minutes last game, and B, they watched the Red Wings play pretty well at home. So, even if the Red Wings lose Game 5, I think they're capable of winning Game 6 and then forcing Game 7. And the one thing about a Game 7, and I know people sort of view it as a cliche, but it's true. Like, it's a coin flip. Historically, Game 7s are coin flips. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Well, we'll see we'll certainly see. We'll get back to that in a second, Kevin. I wanted to touch on a couple of other things. Peter Chiarelli is the Edmonton general manager. I think it was speculated about, and then people thought maybe that won't happen. Again, Mike Babcock mentioned that maybe going there as a dual role, or who knows. Babcock rumors are now going to be, every other second you're going to hear something different. But surprised by that move, and how do you think Chiarelli will do with the young Oilers team, especially now that, much to I think the dismay and chagrin of hockey fans everywhere except in Edmonton, Connor McDavid is going to land there.
Well, I think there is the potential here for Chiarelli to have as big an impact as Connor McDavid. Like, they really needed a change of direction. That franchise has been a mess, and they've tried to fix it by sort of looking back with guys like Kevin Lowe, who helped, and Craig McTavish, who helped them win as players, but haven't been able to win as executives. And to me, it just didn't make any sense to bring Connor McDavid into a franchise being run by guys that have continued on 9 consecutive seasons without making the playoffs. The Red Wings have made the playoffs for 24 consecutive seasons. The Edmonton Oilers have been out of the playoffs for 9 years. Just imagine how this world has changed in the last 9 years while they haven't made the playoffs. So, do you really want to bring Connor McDavid into that sort of mess? I think it's the right move to bring in a very modern guy like Chiarelli, who's Harvard educated, has pretty modern in his approach and so forth. I think this was a good move. I think he'll change it up, and I think it'll be very, very effective.
Well, can you anticipate what he may do? I mean, will he try to shore up the goaltending position first, and will he have to trade some of these forwards, and which forward will go? I know we've discussed it. You get a feeling that it is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who's a good player, somebody that they could get, or do you have to, see how he responds after a couple of weeks on the job when he really hones in on the Oilers and sees what they have and what they really need?
Well, I think he will get goaltending right away, and I think he'll shore up the defense as well. To me, the big question is will Claude Julien be fired by Boston, and if so, will he come right to Edmonton? Because if Julien could come in there, his defensive system alone will be worth like adding a couple of new defensemen, because as we all know, he's a very good defensive coach, maybe the best defensive coach in the league today. So that'll be interesting to watch and see what happens. To me, the Boston Bruins actually owe Claude Julien. They should fire him or give him that option to be fired. They're bringing in a new GM in Boston. Julien won't be his guy. They should go to Claude Julien because of the respect he has around the league and says, what do you want to do? Do you want us to fire you? Because that way there's a lot of good openings right now. He could get one of those openings, and there may not be a lot of openings next year. And usually if a new GM is coming in, your days are numbered.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense to keep him if you are bringing in a new general manager, as you said. Let's look at some of these playoff series. 3 series tonight. Anaheim wrapped theirs up, but 2 teams. The Rangers can eliminate the Penguins tonight, and then of course Montreal can eliminate the Senators, and then we have the St. Louis Blues, who I think sent a message maybe to the Minnesota Wild, but that series now is tied up at 2 again. So how do you see these things unfolding tonight?
Well, all these series have been just sort of fascinating. Like the Blues Blackhawks series, even though it's 2-2, it really it just feels like the Blues turned the corner with that last win. Dubnyk's save percentage, he's been the savior of that franchise since they acquired him from the Arizona Coyotes. And now all of a sudden his save percentage is down in the 860 range, and I think there's a little self-doubt going on there now with them. It's a 2-2 series that feels like the Blues have a 3-1 lead in my opinion, even though both of those teams are pretty good. I still just don't think the Penguins are well enough and healthy enough to extend this series. Malkin is just going through the motions, and I don't think it's his fault at all. I just think he's just too banged up to, participate. And they're on defense. It's like they have a good third defenseman in Paul Martin, and everybody else on the defense is either a 5 or a 6 defenseman. So they're at a real disadvantage because of injury. So I don't see them extending the series. And the big news, obviously, around the league today was the announcement that Shea Weber is indeed out for the rest of this playoff series between the Predators and the Blackhawks, and it's 3-2 Blackhawks, and I think the Blackhawks will win that series. But the other big story is the NBC announced erroneously, apparently, that Shea Weber had an ACL tear, and
oh my gosh,
that turned out to be incorrect. The Predators have sent out a release saying that's just simply not true. But that would have been 4 to 6 months. So that's a pretty big thing to be wrong about.
Yes, it certainly is. But unfortunately, in our profession, that seems to happen with regularity, regardless if it's sports or hard news or whatever. Everybody wants to be first, but sometimes you better make sure that your sources are correct. And usually, having 3 independent sources of each other usually is the best way for that to happen. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about journalism ethics, because I don't even know if we have them anymore. But anyway, let's look at a couple of other series too. Washington and the Islanders. Hey, full marks to the Capitals on this. I mean, they're somehow getting the job done, and I'm pretty surprised because I thought the Islanders had this.
Yeah, me too, and it's pretty impressive because this Capitals team is slowing down an Islanders team that's a really strong offensive team, and they're doing such an effective job that I just was looking this morning, and Josh Bailey has more points than John Tavares, which says the Caps are doing a good job. A lot of it is Holtby, who's really been strong in that. All I could think of as I've been watching him is his boy. Brian Murray and David Poyle probably would have given anything to have a goalie like Holtby back in the days when they had a team that was good enough to win a cup. They didn't have goaltending that was good enough to win a cup. So, I think the Capitals will probably could win this series. I took the Islanders in 7, so I'll stick with it. But right now, it sure looks like the Capitals are the better team.
All right, I know we touched a little bit upon it with the Shea Weber injury, but Nashville and Chicago. I mean, I'm going to give Nashville full marks for their last game performance. Which is really weird. And maybe this happens a lot, but it just seems that goals are coming in the playoffs in bunches. You go forever, and then boom, 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 a team will score like 4 goals in a 2-minute span, and you're wondering what the heck is going on here. But really, I mean, that's what Nashville did. And so I guess as long as you have Pekka Rinne in net, I'll give them a chance, but it just doesn't look good, especially because, as you said, the biggest problem Nashville has is the Chicago Blackhawks, and usually, again, going on the experience, these Blackhawk guys know how to win. So I give Nashville full marks for hanging in there, but somehow I just still think the Blackhawks are going to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're up to now, I think it's 60 wins, playoff wins over the last 6 years. This reminds me of those Red Wing teams that I used to keep track of how many playoff wins that Draper and Maltby and McCarty and Lidstrom and Yzerman had, and it was just phenomenal. You'd look over them, and they would just have 70 or 80 playoff wins on their resumes, and that really makes a difference when you've been there and done that and worn the T-shirt. I just think more about what it takes in order to be successful, and I think that's where the Blackhawks have the advantage is they know they've been in this 3-2 situation before, and they know the importance of closing them out at home.
And finally, maybe the surprise team this year, when you look at what they did during the regular season and what they did and what they've done in the playoffs, even though I think the Vancouver Canucks surprised a lot of people this year with their regular season as well. But Vancouver and Calgary, I mean, the Flames are somehow getting the job done. And I know you picked the Flames. I went with the Canucks, and obviously, Kevin, you seem to know what you're talking about, and as usual, I'm picking up the rear here. But it's
well, I like this Flames team, and I think I like it as for now and for the future. Like if you're looking at this Flames team now, they have Monahan and they've got Bennett at center ice, really two really young centers who are really skilled, and they have Gaudreau now, who's a scoring winger, probably their most exciting young player since Theo Fleury showed up there. They got a defense that's pretty impressive. This Chris Russell just stops shots by the billions. He's a tremendous shot blocker, and Jonas Hiller has done a good job back there as well. So I think this team could be good for a long time. I think they're just going to get better next season.
Well, and we'll see how it all plays out. I wanted to touch upon the series because I got a lot of people that say, well, I know you guys are into the Wings, and we're into the Wings too, but we'd like to hear what you guys think about some of the other series. So there, we said what we think about all the other series going on, and Anaheim looks like that they're ready to roll. With all that said, Kevin, this is episode 19, and maybe I'm an old sentimentalist or something, but I don't know if it's irony or not, because that's a word that is overused a lot and incorrectly in today's society. But this is a crucial game, number 5, and it just so happens to be the 19th episode as we're going into the game number 5. Steve Yzerman. I thought maybe at this point maybe we could take a minute. I know we've talked about him before, but as impressive as he has been as a player, and I'm going to tell you an old story, and I don't know how true it was, but Steve used to get knocked because he wanted to trade Eric Lindros for Sergei Fedorov straight up, and the Red Wings thought, and Stevie back, I thought you were crazy. I would never have done that, and I'm glad that they didn't do it. Or that was kind of the rumor, and it always had heard that when they were players, Steve was more than willing to give his opinion about what the Red Wings should do and whom they should trade for. And when the Red Wings were going to make a deal, and I think fans know this, the general manager and the coaches and the front office, the hierarchy, will go to certain players on the team and say, "What do you think? We're thinking of doing this," and because your best players usually play against your best players. They have a real feel for the league, obviously, because they play in it. And the one player when they were players that the Red Wings trusted emphatically, the guy that they really, really wanted to hear from, was Nick Lindstrom, because he played in every situation against everybody. They heard from Stevie, and sometimes they would agree with what Stevie said, or they would shake their head and say, "God, what? Where's Yzerman coming from?" But with all that said, it certainly seems that he has grown into this role of hockey executive quite nicely, because I have to admit, I am thoroughly impressed with the Tampa Bay Lightning in this series. I know I've seen them throughout the season, but you really get a feel for a team when you get to see them play every other game against the same opponent. And I think Steve's done a great job. I know he was a great player. His tolerance for pain is probably second to none in the National Hockey League. I mean, I know those old guys back then, but let's be honest. The all original six guys, after the games, those guys were getting tanked up on anything they could find as far as drinking and all that kind of stuff. So little liquid. I just put a Band-Aid on it and I'll go back out. I know you were tougher. I'm going to give that to you. But Yzerman, I don't know how many injuries he could sustain. I mean, knee injuries, leg practically falling off, getting hit in the face, and he kept coming back. So, with all that said, I mean, he knows what he's doing. I don't think that, and I know Red Wing fans want him to come back here. I don't know if he's so eager to come back to Detroit as an administrator. I think he likes his time. He cherishes his time in Detroit. I think being a legendary Red Wings player is good for him. I think, if he never comes back to Detroit and becomes a general manager or runs the team or has anything to do with the organization, I think he's fine with it. I don't know if the fan base will be fine with it, but Steve Yzerman has to be considered, I believe, one of the top executives in hockey right now.
I don't think there's any question. I think he could win GM of the Year this season. And the one thing about Steve, why that you could be correct about him not wanting to come back here, is he does not enjoy the spotlight. Like, I'm sure he's proud of his accomplishments and proud to have, been the leader of the Red Wings and proud of his heritage and, legacy. But, he doesn't, he's uncomfortable, talking about himself. He's uncomfortable being honored. That's just not what he does. That's not what he's into. And in Tampa, he's been allowed to just go in there, and everybody knows who he is, obviously. But it's not the same as if he was doing it in Detroit. And I think it just makes it a little nicer for him, a little better environment, just because he's not all that comfortable, being exalted. But, he's just done a great job right from the beginning, and he's built a team. You look at, Ben Bishop in goal was his, trade acquisition, the Ryan Callahan trade, forced into making a trade for Martin St. Louis, only one option that he was given, and he ends up getting, a great return and getting Callahan out of the deal. I mean, Callahan, you can argue, is more valuable to the Lightning than St. Louis was. I mean, they've replaced his goals. They're the number one offensive team, but now they have Callahan, who's a lot of bite, and he's found the right coach in John Cooper. The trade for Garrison, the acquisitions of Strawman and Boyle. Again, very calculated, bringing in guys who had been in very experienced, Braden Coburn, bringing him in at the deadline, another experienced guy, and then just having faith in guys like Johnson and giving him a chance, and Palat, allowing that line to sort of develop. He's just been a very, very effective manager.
Yeah, he certainly has been, and as I said, and I'm kind of joking around a little bit, but I know that there was a time when people were thinking, wow, Steve's a great hockey player, but will that, translate onto the, and how many times have we heard it in sports that a lot of times your greatest players do not make a smooth transition into the front office. He certainly is one of those, and maybe it happens more in hockey though, perhaps than any other sports. But certainly, we always the old Sparky Anderson thing. Sparky had 10 games in the majors, but was a great manager. That a lot of times Jim Leland. Although I know Tiger fans, you want to say he's a great manager, but he was in the minor leagues for 37 years or something, and finally when he got his chance to be a major league manager, he was able to do it. But Steve has been able to make that transition, and I think perhaps because I was surprised by this, because you're right, he doesn't like the spotlight. Him becoming the general manager in the face of Team Canada and being very successful at it. Granted, he surrounded himself with Kenny Holland. He had his security blanket, his Linus blanket with him, and and Babcock is the coach who Steve might have had some run-ins with when they were player and coach, but actually knew that Babcock had not only, I think, the talent as a coach, but the ego to handle other egos, which is very, very important, and something that we probably don't talk a lot about handling players as far as personalities and egos, which is every bit a delicate situation for a coach as anything as far as determining a player's ice time and whether he sits or not. But overall, again, I mean, Steve has just turned into the complete package, and I think that is because his drive and desire to be the best and to face adversity head on, I think, is what's made him not only the player but the administrator and the man that he is. I mean, Yzerman's a pretty good guy. He really is. And he's pretty funny and all that. He doesn't open it up very often, but really, if you want somebody to be completely dedicated to whatever the task at hand is, you really couldn't find a better person than Steve Yzerman. I'm sounding like it's Jon Stewart or David Letterman's final show here, Yeah, what a great guy, So long, Steve. Have a great time in Ottawa or wherever you want to live, and we'll talk to you. But I mean, I guess I'm thoroughly impressed because I really did not know just how good, borderline maybe great, depending on how this playoff turns out for them, the Tampa Bay Lightning really are, and you've got to look right at Steve because of it.
Yeah, no, there's no question. But he served in apprenticeship under Kenny Holland. I mean, everything that he is, he learned as part of the Red Wing organization, and he learned from Devellano, he learned from Kenny Holland, he learned from Jim Nill. I'm sure he even learned something from Babcock as well. And some players are not open enough to realize that they can be taught by people in authority above them. They're used to getting things done themselves. But Steve Yzerman is a very bright man, as everyone knows, and I think he figured out early that he knew a lot about playing and he knew a lot about how to be successful as a player, but he had to actually learn the ropes on the management side of it, and he was willing to do that. He didn't believe that he was entitled to be a GM or an executive just based on the fact he was Steve Yzerman. He was willing to work at it.
Well, what I think he understands is, and you're right about that, is that when he wanted to be a hockey player, he didn't know how to be a hockey player. He had to learn how to be a hockey player. In any new situation you go into, you've got to learn almost from the bottom up if you really want to be successful. And you're right, he didn't take any shortcuts. I mean, he could have walked right in and said, okay, yeah, I'm assistant general manager. What, you want me to go on road trips? What are you, crazy? I'm done going on the road. If I'm going on the road, I'm going on the road with the Red Wings so I can hit my favorite restaurants in towns, But he didn't do that. I mean, he really did stick to it and, learn from the bottom up. And I think that's why he's successful in anything he chooses to do. He gets it and he understands it. And, I guess I couldn't be happier for him because of all the BS that he had to go through. The one thing, Kevin, when we wrote that book, What It Means to Be a Red Wing, and is that, and Steve wrote the foreword where he said if there was one thing maybe he would have changed during his Red Wings career, he wouldn't have waited 15 seasons to win the Stanley Cup. I mean, that was about, it took a little bit longer than he thought. But really, overall, he was at peace with everything. He's really grounded and settled in what he's doing.
Yeah, he is. And, I also appreciate the fact that he he's still a Detroiter. Like, he commutes back and forth. And, he has a place obviously in Tampa, but he spends still a lot of time in Detroit. He has family here, and I think he still considers this home, and I don't think Yzerman will ever think of even if he's in Tampa the rest of his career. I think he's still going to think of Detroit as his hometown.
Well, I can just imagine if it ever happens, and I'm not saying it's going to, because I truly believe it's not. If he ever comes back and is president and general manager of the Red Wings, please, and I'm just urging all the Detroit leadership, do not put his image on a building of him in a suit. I don't think I don't think he appreciated I don't think he liked being on a building as a player, but putting him up there as a suit with a cell phone in his hand or something. I'm pretty sure that that would be something that would not go over well with Stevie Y. But we'll see. All right, Kevin, I'm sorry. I figure, hey, 19. We're never going to have another episode 19. 119 no. We will.
Yeah, that's right. Or 1900. We might have 1900.
Yes, 1900 too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's my goal. I'm shooting for at least 1900.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Kevin. Now, where are you off to? Can you reveal?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I mean, if Pittsburgh extends, then I'll be heading there, and if they don't, then we're going to wait and see what happens tonight, and I'll make a decision tomorrow morning about where I'm going. I mean, I could still end up in Chicago, depending on what happens.
Okay, well, and finally then, like we can't decide, we like to share with our audience behind-the-scenes chatter of what we decide. I know Game 6 is Monday in Detroit. Do you want to shoot for another one of these on Monday, or do you want to go for Sunday?
Let's see. So it's no. I think we should probably do. Well, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see what Pittsburgh does. If I got to go to Pittsburgh on Sunday, I probably won't be able to do one then. But then we'd have to do it Monday. But if I'm not going to Pittsburgh, I can probably do one Sunday because I'll probably go somewhere tomorrow instead. Okay, all right, that sounds good, Kevin. You're busy, hardest working man in hockey show business, you, Kevin Allen. So, safe travels Monday or Tuesday. Sunday or Monday. Just wait, and hopefully, it is amazing that I've gotten through this thing, because as soon as this camera is off, I'm not feeling well, but. I guess it's a testament to Kevin's holding my interest this long for me not to think about how bad I feel. But anyway, Kevin, enjoy your travels. We will talk to you very, very soon. And that'll do it for this edition of the Red and White Authority, episode number 19. For Kevin Allen, I'm Art Regner. Have a safe and pleasant one, everyone. Enjoy all the hockey playoff games. They have been, for the most part, rather fabulous. But we'll talk to you soon. See you. Take care. Bye-bye.